Specific purpose. I would like to persuade my audience to understand the subject of racial inequality in the United States from an unpopular point of view. Central idea. Thomas Sowell was a man who, in his circumstances, could have easily agreed with the rhetoric of the disparities of Black America, but he went against popular opinion to find out the source of economic disadvantages instead of blaming an easy scapegoat: inequality. His courage has led a new generation of personally accountable Black Americans. If you have always believed that everyone should play by the same rules and be judged by the same standards, that would have gotten you labeled a radical 60 years ago, a liberal 30 years ago, and a racist today. Written by Thomas Sowell in 2013. Summer of 2020 was a woke moment in the United States history that we can all relate to in some way. With the amount of media coverage, we had no choice but to form an opinion. Of course, we believe that Black Lives Matter, but are we pinpointing a problem that has no relevance? A person that I learned about during the Black Lives Matter movement has lived through a similar situation and has a controversial theory as to why blacks and whites should not be treated differently. Thomas Sowell was born June 30th, 1930. During one of the hardest economic times in the history of the United States, both the Great Depression and the Civil Rights Movement. Thomas has experienced the highs and lows of the Black community. His point of view is that we are missing self-accountability. Some of his greatest research comes from subjects like racial inequality, education, and family structure. Racism has been a subject in politics for as long as we have been a country. But in our short history, we have changed exponentially. We were the first country in the world to question the morality of slavery. We laid the foundations of equality for all. For decades, Democrats have distorted the idea that blacks were economically worse off, and the remedy was social programs. In reality, it was the opposite. In an interview, Thomas explains how blacks were able to raise their economic well-being regardless of laws that were in place to keep them at a lower social status. After working for the Department of Labor in 1960, he saw a correlation between economic well-being and social welfare programs. His research showed that the poverty rate in the Black community declined much slower than before major expansion of the welfare system. Before that conclusion was made, Thomas Sowell recalls a life lesson that stuck with him since he was a young child. Thomas had a dog named Bruno who gave birth to puppies. Bruno's puppies were getting older, and she was in the process of weaning them. He became upset at the sight of Bruno not feeding her puppies, so in an attempt to do the right thing, Thomas tries to force the dog to feed the puppies. His family stops him and assures that the dog was doing as nature intended. While he always remembered Bruno and her pups, Thomas also found reason for insufficiencies: lack of education and family structure. Education is a major influence as to whether a person will be economically successful or not, Sowell believed. When Thomas moved from the slow town of Charlotte to Harlem, he had a higher standard of living regardless of his race. With his new life, he also noticed a different pace in school. Thomas realized shortly after moving from South Carolina that it didn't prepare him for school in New York. In his autobiography, A Personal Odyssey, he says, "Although we were all black kids in Harlem, I was from the South and talked funny. Besides, everyone knew that Southern kids were dumb." While education is very important, Thomas's research on family dynamics revealed that the roots of being successful starts at home. Fathers in the home were prevalent, and the economy in the Black community grew faster than the rest of the country soon after slavery ended. By the 1960s, when welfare economics became popular, single-parent households were becoming a trend, and the Black community suffered. Research showed that there was an incentive for fathers to not participate in the household. Thomas's adoptive parents spent plenty of quality time with him and even taught him how to read before he started the first grade. His upbringings and role models were impressionable enough to shape the man we see today. Now, at 91 years old, Thomas is the epitome of what being self-accountable is. Using Thomas Sowell as a role model, I hope to remind people that before we go around helping others, we need to understand that to most people, it's more of a dependency than an advancement. Thomas has spent his entire life interpreting the story of why Bruno needed to wean her puppies from her care. We cannot continue to let people nurse from the government for the rest of their lives, or we will never grow.